Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Print on Demand Playbook. I'm Rusty Pepper,
And I'm Maddy Alcala.
and today we're taking a deep dive into the print on demand industry, specifically all the things that went down in 2024. And then we're going to look ahead at what to keep an eye on in 2025. So we got lots of interesting things that we're going to be talking about.
Oh, yes, we do. 2024 was a pretty wild ride for the industry. Wouldn't you
It
say?
was. I would definitely say it was.
Oh, yeah. We saw some major shifts, definitely some unexpected challenges, and a lot of innovation. So we've got a lot to cover, actually. So why don't we jump into it, Rusty? And actually, before we do, I'll kick things off. We're 10 days into the new year as you and I talk about this. How's 2025 so far?
It is here, and which I'm excited about. I was like over the Christmas break. It's nice to be able to break, spend some time with the family and all. But the way 2024 kind of wrapped up, I was like, I knew this was being kicked off. We've got a busy travel schedule. 2025 is already off to a rapid fire start. I mean, the first week is done. Next thing we're going to be at PPAI traveling next week. Then we got impressions. Then we're going to Latvia, doing all that. So it has been a busy, busy week. How about for you?
Also a very busy week, and I agree. You and I are literally taking the show on the road over the next couple of the weeks, so I'm excited for that. But before we get mobile, which we will do very soon, why don't we take a look back at 2024? Personally, let's just start talking about some big themes we saw last year. So I'll start. When you and I were having a conversation about this the other day, feels like 2024 was in some ways the first normal year after COVID, but we still saw some challenges in the market. We had a couple pretty big profile bankruptcies. What do you think about that? What are some ones that you'd call out?
Well, obviously, you had the color wheel. Delta kind of came out. I think a lot of people expected the Delta one to happen, right? But it brought down
Yeah.
DTG to go. I was surprised that nobody really made a big play to try to save DTG to go.
Yeah, it was interesting watching that one relatively close. Obviously they'd had challenges for a while, but it's kind of crazy because there aren't that many public companies in our space, and Delta was, really at the top for a while. And feel bad for that team. It was obviously they built some incredible things, but I think I was surprised too, and it probably speaks to some of the broader challenges I think players are still facing, and we're going to
Mhm.
see those play out with benefits because I know we're going to talk about consolidation, but I imagine there are some companies that would have loved to come in and take over DTG to go, but they may not have had the capital.
Yeah, but went so quick. All of a sudden, it was just like, boom, done. We're shutting it
Yeah,
down. And
I
now
know.
the good thing is there was a lot of people that were able to pick up a lot of really cheap apparel. I mean,
That's
off
very
that. I
true.
mean, we've gotten lots of emails about that. Hey, we bought all this stuff in the Delta, but I don't know, I can go down that little rabbit hole, but that was one that kind of caught me off. Then you also had Catalyst Fabric Solutions. They shut down some of the smaller players as well. So there's still some uncertainty. I don't think we're going to see, at least I don't believe, I know we're not talking about 2025 yet, but hopefully that doesn't play out again in this year.
I hope so too. I think we're gonna see some other themes play out likely with, some of the
Mhm.
production players. I think we're predicting more consolidation, but we'll get to that later in the episode. So that's the supply side. What about the demand side? Look, I think if you and I had recorded this episode a year and a half ago, we would have been talking about creator economy, metaverse, all those buzzwords. What are some of the themes we saw with that side of the world last year?
Well, obviously TikTok right now is front and center being the very first part of January, right? So that's there,
Yeah.
but that really was a big mover for a lot of the POD space. A lot of people were trying to
Yep.
software. I know your firm was in there. You're doing a lot with
Yep.
TikTok. So I'm actually gonna flip around on you on that one because I think you're probably way better first to be able to talk about social commerce and what you're seeing over there and what was in 2024. How was it?
Yeah, well, 2024 was interesting because TikTok Shop had their 1 year birthday. I believe it was in September,
Yep.
because ByteDance launched TikTok Shop September of 23. And we saw just rapid explosion of growth in that channel. I think Instagram shopping is the other big one to watch on the social commerce side. So definitely a ton of growth opportunity. I think at Gooten, we still feel like it's a little bit of the Wild West. We saw a bunch of policy changes with TikTok Shop last year. We expect more. Obviously, there's uncertainty with the US political regime and the courts of what's going to happen with that platform. But I think still pretty strong thesis that social commerce is here to stay, and we really saw it arrive in many ways last year. I think on the flip side of that, creator economy was the space to watch. Continued to see a come down last year. I think a lot of platforms having challenges, and then even as we continue to see algorithm changes, making it harder and easier across different selling channels really for sellers to reach their audiences. I think that was definitely a theme of last year, especially through Q2 and Q3 into the peak season that we saw play out in some of the results.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely no doubt the slowdown with the consumer spending with the election year, and that part also, I think, put a little bit of pressure in that market. Uh, I don't
Yeah.
know why the election years always creates that little bit of a drama of, well, let's not do anything crazy or spending. I think out now that we're out of that, there's a lot more wind in the sails for that market. So yeah, I think that's going to be one of the trends that we look at and we talk about for 2025. I do think that algorithm part of the whole people how being able to figure that part out. I know a lot of fulfillers also struggle with the SLAs that like TikTok
Mhm.
Shop put in place, being able to hit those SLAs. That was a major challenge for in a lot of conversation I had with a lot of the other fulfillers out there who were servicing that
Yeah.
market as well. Boy, what are they doing? Because it was also it kept changing on them too. It was like they
I
couldn't keep
know.
up with all the different changes. So
Yeah, and it was challenging for us too, and I think the same thing for sellers, really everybody in the ecosystem, because there's so much opportunity. We just pick on TikTok Shop,
huge
so much
opportunities.
opportunity, such a fast growing channel, so many eyeballs, and yet that's why I said a little bit of the Wild West, right? Things are still changing, a lot of uncertainty that in that channel, and then that just ties into the broader uncertainty that we definitely lived through with the election, and I think in the U.S. we're still living through. So I'll talk about that for 2025 predictions, but. It seems to be the name of the game is nobody's got the crystal ball of exactly what's gonna happen.
No, they don't. And, also, I think for a lot of these creators, they also have to try to figure out how do they break out that sea of sameness? There's just so much content out there. It's
Yeah.
overly saturated in the market. And that's going to shift out. And
Mhm.
as more eyeballs go into it, that one thing I'm also, I think, in this, I keep wanting to jump to 2025 for our so I
I
apologize,
know.
but I just get excited about it. Something we also want to kind of bookmark for that future conversation is the business conversion rate for how are they actually adopting and getting into the whole social commerce side of it. That's something to be watching for too in
Mm.
2025. So um,
Yep.
let's go into something where I think, if you don't mind, because we do, I think that's a rabbit hole we can go into because I think it's an exciting one and a journey.
Yes.
But really, when we think about the topics of like, think about IP infringement and some of the lawsuits there.
Mm.
What was your take there?
Yeah, well, I think, if I were to zoom out even more, because we just went through, some of the challenges on the supply side, we talked about the demand side, so creator economy, social commerce, right? I think right in the middle of those two things is content, right? It's the actual content, the designs that are going on those products that's generated by the brand, desired by the consumer, and then of course produced. I think that on the positive side of that, last year continued to see this, mass adoption in many ways of AI and design tooling that really has democratized access. Anyone with a laptop or a phone can create something that is now potentially relevant to print on demand. And that's awesome. I think that opens up pockets of growth, opens up new innovation, new ideas. It's going to be really exciting to see kind of how AI and generative imagery continues to enter our space. I think on the flip side of that, right, we saw IP go back to the courts. And this has just been a theme of our industry. This is not the first time we've had lawsuits around copyright infringement. I'm sure it won't be the last. And all the major content players have had, some sort of input into this space over the past 5 to 10 years. So last year we saw there was a lawsuit that Printify worked with. We saw, I think, another lawsuit with a Pennsylvania university or brand. And it was interesting because I think it just continues to open up that question of how really everyone in the ecosystem can protect themselves, and ensure that we aren't infringing on private property, copyrights, intellectual property that people have. But it also feels like an opportunity for growth because we're seeing some new tooling come out that can really help with image detection, and comparing imagery against databases. So I think it's a forcing change still for all of us, but luckily for all the players in the space, there are solutions that help everyone be compliant and make sure that as we're growing, we're doing so with imagery that is fair to use.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you think about from a fulfiller standpoint too, that's something we worry about because we
Mhm.
just received the
Yeah,
print ready art files and we're producing it. And where does the liability fall? That's still something that hasn't been completely proven. When but being a
mhm,
bigger fulfiller, they're coming after the people with the biggest checkbooks, right?
of
Who's
course.
got the biggest? We can get the lawyers are just going to go after where they can get the most money. And so it goes all the way downstream. So how we can actually all protect each other, the technology solutions that need to come into place. I also think blockchain could also be a solution, part of that
Yeah.
solution too.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that we're gonna continue to see innovation, with how do we protect IP, and I think partnership, collaboration, new technologies is the way that we can all in the industry benefit. Knowledge sharing, what's working, what's not working, and then working together on it as well, to make sure everybody's protected because it hurts Guten if Taylor has a problem, and I know a lot of your partners everyone who partners would say the same, and, I think you and I are both believers of what's good for the industry is good for all of us in it.
Yeah. And nobody wants to take away from the person whose IP it is, right? If it's their copyright, they
Exactly.
should be entitled, and they should be monetizing that and making money from it. And it's theirs to protect. And I'm all for it. At the same
Yeah.
time, it's really, really hard because anybody can go grab that, upload, and
Yeah.
ask to have it printed. And so there has to be those technology layers in place. And I do think there's going to be huge opportunities in the coming years of how they can actually to solve for that. So I think that's a really interesting topic from 2024, a theme, and we'll see how it continues to shake out, especially within the courts.
Yeah, definitely. And I think something you and I just brought up is sorry to cut you off, but I want to dive into partnerships and new tech because we saw some pretty cool stuff come out last year. So what were some of your big or favorite partnerships that excited you last year? Got announced.
The one that there was quite a few, right? We're not
Mm,
talking about mergers at this point yet, are we?
no, let's go. There was enough of them, big ones. So I think
I was going
that
to say
reserves
there's
time
a
of its
lot. I
own.
know we have a huge list there.
Yeah.
One that this is probably one that probably isn't gonna be on a lot of people's radars, but I thought was very interesting just because of
Mm,
one of the markets that it goes through is the ASI, uh, partnering with Printing United Alliance, bringing 2
yeah.
industry, associations together. Really, it's that merging of that whole promo and print and making them more closely aligned. To me, that was one
Mm,
that I felt was very interesting, and I saw the effects of it firsthand at Printing United. For the first time at Printing
nice.
United, I saw a ton of promotional companies, not only there as vendors, but also attending. So that's something that I think
Yeah.
will really continue to influence our industry as well. How about on your side?
That's a good one. I think it's an indication of a bigger market shift,
Yeah,
which is interesting. I always find it interesting to see, especially on the more public side, kind of who's working together. I thought the Canva and HP announcement was interesting. I think that's an indicator toward just continued focus from some of the largest players around global print consistency and really seeing the supply and the demand and all the different players in the ecosystem come together and say how can we make this better for consumers. Shutterfly and Amazon Prime was
mhm,
another interesting one. It's no secret. We were just talking about fulfillment SLAs with TikTok. Speed is the name of the game. And so I thought that was a pretty strong indicator around delivery speed and shipping and logistics and just, a major customization print on demand platform like Shutterfly, can be pretty public about wanting to open that up to
yeah,
consumers. Adobe Express coming out. They've obviously grown quite a
and
bit.
that's Zazzle. Yeah,
Zazzle's Yep, Zazzle's supporting that, and, really interesting to see kind of how their print community evolves, as, we look at, again, there's that kind of blending of, like, democratization of design with that physical product piece. Um, and then I always keep an eye on Fanatics. So this. I look at the apparel world quite a bit. Obviously, Fanatics is a huge powerhouse, but they did some pretty cool merch deals last year, and they've been such a pioneer in print on demand for apparel. That I always just see that as a really good indicator, even if they're not using POD with all these deals,
yeah.
that POD is becoming even of a more mainstream supply chain strategy. That we see major sports teams and organizations globally working with Fanatics on merch. I think that's a good indicator.
It's a critical support. It's good. It's actually becoming more
Yeah.
and more and more. Excuse me. I got a frog in my throat. It's a more critical part of the supply chain that
Yeah.
everybody's got to be incorporating, because why would you take on liabilities if you don't need to? And that's what POD supports. It makes it easy.
Yep.
So
Yep.
those were
Totally.
great. Those were great partnerships and call outs you had there. I really like really where what I think is interesting about the Adobe and Zazzle one is how does that influence or affect start to really push and chase down Canva?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I
That
mean,
puts more
those
pressure there.
2 Yeah, those 2 are, I think are fighting a good fight. That's honestly good for the industry, right? And I think good for the consumers too.
100%.
There's becoming more and more choice and optionality for creators, businesses, kind of anyone wanting to get into the space and design to access really, really powerful tooling. And then the integration of print within that is awesome for our space. So obviously Canva and Adobe are the biggest ones, but there's others out there. So I think that's a space to watch for sure.
It is definitely a space to watch, and really where what I liked about the Adobe Express one is if they can actually somehow really get tap into Adobe's massive database of corporate accounts and
Mhm.
clients to the enterprise
Oh,
side of the
yeah.
business. That's game changing for them, because that is where,
Yep.
as you know, I'm really passionate about the whole corporate enterprise part of the market. That to me is an open door for them to really be able to scale and grow. And waiting to
Yeah.
see something in 2025 to watch out for is Microsoft Designer. Do they get into the print game as well?
Yeah. Totally. There's a lot of those operating systems and design tools that could make some big waves here. So,
Big time,
interesting
big time.
opportunities. Speaking of big waves, you brought up consolidation, and I want to come to that because I think we both agree there are a couple big market moving events that kind of deserve their own time in the spotlight. So you go first. You want to talk about the Printful Printify tie-up? Because that's a big one.
Or as Shell says, the Printopoly. Yeah,
I am sure they have heard Printfilify and so many different combinations.
yeah.
I do believe they rebranded though. I think they're Fuel. I think that is
Fuel
actually the correct
is going to be
Fuel. I believe that is the correct name.
the parent company. They're still going to operate though as Printify and
Yes.
Printful in the markets,
Okay,
but
good.
Fuel is
Good
the
to know.
combined entity for everyone, and
Okay.
it's a which I think is great because it's obviously sentiment. It brings together both names into one. I do like
Yeah.
that. That was some big news. Substantial market share now has been between those two. They've taken a big
Mhm.
chunk of that. And how does that apply pressure now to the supply chain? Right when you,
Yeah.
I think from the creator standpoint, there's some concerns there from a pricing
Mhm.
standpoint. How does all that happen? But the thing to watch out for, and one of the things that I've heard from quite a few fulfillers already, is if they're working for Printify,
Mhm.
how does that affect them wanting to work with now this combined entity, because the
Yeah.
competitive landscape there? That's something that I don't know if it's what it's going to be, but that's the one part that I find is going to be very interesting for our overall industry.
Mhm.
What's your take?
Yes, I agree. I think it's look, I take the positive spin on these things. Broadly, I think in general, that tie-up is a positive for the industry.
Absolutely.
You've got major private equity behind Printful, Briegel, Sagemount. Deal dynamics are not public, but speculating that Briegel is, putting combined, money into this combined entity, really driving growth. We've seen other major PE players back production facilities between HIG behind Sensaria. You've got, the backers behind Mad Engine and a few others. So continued private equity capital to really help this space grow on the production side, I think is generally great. The flip side of that, that changes the dynamics a little bit because, I think the market then starts to have to think a little bit more about fund return horizons and just the overall private capital influence and motivation that is different than a privately owned or family owned business, which I think is where a lot of POD has come from. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. I agree with you. I think it's the kind of supply side dynamics there of how producers, especially apparel producers, really react to that combination. We're starting to see, but I also think not a whole lot has changed because that deal was announced right before Q4, and the collective leadership of Printful and Printify, I'm sure, was very wise in not making any big moves, as they didn't want to disrupt order volume. So be interesting to see that play out in Q1, and hopefully we have the opportunity to sit down with some people from both of those companies and ask them some questions directly in a few weeks.
I'm hoping that happens as well because there is a lot of
Yeah.
questions I think we both have, and I think for the industry as well, there's a lot of unknowns and uncertainties that they've obviously taken into account. These wicked smart groups, and I overall
Mhm.
think it is a fantastic merger. Really, when you think about it, putting those two together because you have one that's really focused on enterprise, one that's focused on the creators. One's got a supply chain, one does in-house. It's really is. It's great. It's global, and if
Yeah.
nothing, it's going to make the whole industry better because it's going to force everyone to get better.
Yes, absolutely. And I think as we're talking about consolidation, we'd be remiss not to mention SNS Activewear and Alpha Broder, also in the apparel space, also private equity backed. That was another big one for this summer. And I've had a lot of conversations over the past couple months around that impact. So again, interested to see what that means to the market. You know, really impressive leadership teams on both sides of those businesses, really impressive logistics, scale and breadth across, now the combined footprint, something crazy like 19 warehouses. Don't quote me on that, but I just remember thinking and looking at some of the stats of like kind of their geographic reach of how quickly they can get millions and millions and millions of dollars of inventory into the decorator hands, all of the innovation and robotics and technology that those businesses have. So that is, yeah, I think another exciting and great one for the industry. But again, it's less choice. So interested to see how that impacts the decorators and the supply side of the market. Everything we just talked about with Printful and Printify is pricing dynamics and choice dynamics and leadership teams and anytime there's consolidation at that scale of multi-billion-dollar companies coming together, there'll definitely be some market changes.
It definitely will. And there was one last one that happened at the end of last year, and that was the
Ooh,
BDA in the promotional products industry. BDA acquired Swag Up.
yeah,
So that
I
was, I
know.
think, right at the end of December that was announced. So that was one that I
Yeah.
think we're really going to see the benefits or effects of
Mhm.
going into 2025. But those are the three that I
That is a
saw.
good reminder. Sorry to cut you off. I would say that was a good reminder. I've met the CEO of Swag Up a few times. I need to send him a congratulations email. Some
Yeah,
very
right.
impressive business that he's built. Yep.
Yeah, no, and in a relatively short time, I think they launched in 2016. So, and BDA has been
Yeah.
around since 1984. So it's great. It, those are things that we're going to see. I think we're going to see more of that, especially with promo. What would be interesting to see is when do promo companies and print companies start to merge as well.
I think it's gonna be soon. I
It
think it's
will.
gonna be very soon. Yeah.
And I think
Well,
we'll
look,
talk about that
let's
in the
switch.
2025 part. I know that's a big part of what we're going to be talking about in that one. So
I know, you and I have been itching since we kicked this off to talk 2025, so why
we
don't we
keep
get
trying to
there? But
pull
before we do,
ourselves into
let's
2025. That was like everything goes back
we're just
into it.
ready to go.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, let's wrap up though for everybody some themes. I'm just gonna list them off. You let me know if I missed anything. So, what did we talk about? We talked about some challenges, some major bankruptcies, Color Real, Delta, Catalyst Fabric. We talked about the creator economy, social commerce, content and IP, AI, softwares, partnerships, kind of everything new coming out, consolidation, big M&A trend of last year. We'll talk about that continuing. Enterprise adoption, merging of print and promos, or anything we missed, Rusty, as you look backwards. I was trying to do this the other day too. It's like, what happened last year? So much stuff.
There
Anything we
there was a
missed?
lot, but we could literally I mean, if
Yeah.
we really wanted to try to get in the weeds, we could. Those were I think, the major big things, in our opinion, that we saw in 2024, which I believe really set us up for what I believe is going to be a even better 2025.
Yes, completely agree. Well, we've been itching to talk about it. Let's talk about this year. What's next? Pull out the crystal ball. You've got to have a crystal ball behind you on that shelf somewhere. So kick us off. You look ahead. What do you think will be a major trend in 2025?
My first big trend is going to be the obvious one, and
Okay.
I'm going to save that to the end because this could be the mergers and the M&A part of it.
Yeah.
I think the consolidation. I think we save that to the end because that's one. The continued emergence of the growth of enterprise and corporate markets in our space,
Mm.
and seeing the influence of new technologies that are coming out that are being invested
Yep.
into being able to service and solve for managing enterprise and corporate spend.
Mm. Okay.
That's
It's a
one
very
thing.
that's a big one. I think we're gonna learn even more about that pretty soon at some of these shows that we're going to. So probably even a lot more to say in specifics of how that's playing out early in the year.
There's
Very
the
cool.
biggest challenge that most of these companies are gonna have is on the technology side is how do you solve for uh, expense management, cost
Mm,
allocations. Those are the things that print on demand still has a lot of the tools have not solved for,
mm,
right? Because in order to get those companies on board, they've got to be able to have all those expense management systems put in there. You're going to have
mhm.
e-commerce, e-procurement integrations, all those different elements
Yep.
are going to come in. And what will still be, there'll be that need for that hybrid store. And I know we'll talk about
Yeah.
company store technology as well, but there's a lot of change that's going to have to go and a lot of investment that still has to go in to
Mhm.
get make that really streamlined. But corporates, the corporate markets, corporations, they are hungry for this change. They don't want
Yeah.
liabilities, and they don't want to spend the time and resource that they used to do the old-fashioned way of putting things in a warehouse and letting it go to waste. They want to be able to hyper
Yeah.
personalize and get it. So
Yeah, well, more good opportunity for all the players in the space, and you hit on I think a good trend there is software and technology innovation. Shameless plug for Guten. We launched our order mesh platform last year. It's a program that intends to solve a lot of those connectivity challenges. Gelato launched Gelato Connect. I think for this year, one of my predictions is we're going to see more of that software integration, more products, more technologies coming out, and I think AI is going to start to catch like wildfire in this industry. I
yeah,
think we're still going to be in the incubation stage for a lot of what that looks like. We're already starting to see AI have an impact on imagery and image detection, kind of that mid funnel part of producing a product. I think we're going to start to see some, beta, pilot, MVP programs around workflow automation and efficiency and digital workers and routing and data and all that stuff that can really make this space hyper efficient and kind of help us all scale. So I don't think we're going to be, fully there yet by the end of 2025, but I think we're going to start to see a lot of people experiment with some of these new AI technologies and should mean really good things. And hopefully, like to your point, help newer entrants to print on demand get in a way that works for their business.
yeah, AI is going to come from going off of just being, hey, how do we kind of experimenting with it to really being fully integrated with a lot of these solutions. I
Yep.
mean, I think just from a workflow standpoint, from production,
Yeah.
it should make things flow way easier. And also customer behavior, customer support, customer service. No, I haven't
Absolutely.
seen a lot of folks really gravitate to it, but companies like Engage AI doing huge things
Hmm.
over there. And they're why would you not take advantage of these efficiencies? It just to me it makes no sense.
Exactly. And I'm 10 days into the year, but I haven't had a business day yet in 2025 where I haven't talked about AI.
Yeah,
And that's either because someone's asking me about it or a new tool or an opportunity's come up. And I think what's cool for our space too, and really honestly for everyone looking at these technologies is there's such huge venture funding going into AI that we can get access to this technology, say the collective we, honestly subsidized by a lot of these VC dollars because so many of these startups are looking for usage and adoption that I think there's some really good deals to be had. So, one of my predictions and frankly encouragements for the space is I think we should all be innovators and experimenters and then share knowledge around how some of this new technology can make us all better.
how do you see that happening? Or how do you propose making that shared knowledge easier?
Well, I'm a big believer in partnerships, Rusty. So, look, we talked about some of the big ones for last year. I think partnerships, especially in today's market, are the accelerant to growth. I think there's some awesome companies out there across the supply and demand side, and I think a lot of those companies have grown, at the full maturity stage, but gotten past that kind of scrappy, wild west days of print on demand that was 2015 to kind of 2020 when COVID forced all of us to really
Mhm.
enter a new world. I think there's a lot of knowledge sharing opportunities, both formally through partnerships and working together, and then informally, you and I mentioned these shows. I always learn a ton by going and traveling and meeting with people. And so I think that's something that we should all push for is formal and informal ways to share best practices. Partnerships
Yeah,
is my as another prediction I have. We'll see more of those come out this year.
yeah. No, I 100% agree and support that whole part from a partnership standpoint. 1 plus 1 equals 3, as you've talked about many times, and that's there's a certain amount of truth to that because we can't all do it ourselves. I'm going to go back though to the technology side, and you brought up order
Okay.
mesh. You brought, I mean, there's obviously a Gelato Connect. There's
Yep.
cloud printers doing some interesting things out there. What are some? Are there
Yep.
any others out there that you feel like are interesting for our industry or could be incorporated into our industry?
Yeah, so I mean, on the software side, I think you hit some of the big ones. There's so much we don't know, but I think we will see new products and softwares released this year. The production side, I'm keeping a really close eye on direct to film or DTF. I think
Yeah,
we're going to hear a lot about that at Impressions, the show coming up in a few weeks in Long Beach. You've had M&R, Rock, a lot of the major equipment players in apparel launch new machines recently or probably gonna roll them out at the show, that will really take that production technology from something I think that was, again, a little more Wild West and formalize it, scale it, make it, accessible to all sorts of different players. So that's one I'm keeping an eye on. And then I think 3D printing, look, that's a little bit of an like that was the buzzword of the moment a few years ago, but
it
I
was.
actually think we're seeing it come back in a few ways. So I'm always interested to see the new printing technologies. So those are two I think that I'm watching. What do you think?
I know Cordy's got their what is their new
Apollo.
machine they're launching. Yeah, so that could be a
Yeah,
game changer as well because it gets closer
true.
to high volume production from screen printing. And once that we've always said, once the industry on the apparel side, they can match the screen printing cost and speed and volumes.
Mhm.
It's lights out for everyone. It's huge.
I
That is a
know.
so it'll be interesting to see are they really able to accomplish that.
Yeah, well, I think the Corny Apollo and I also think DTF are 2 big disruptors to the screen printing industry. I don't think screen printing is going anywhere. I think that technology is here to stay, but I think what we're seeing is that with the advancements of these new tech, this new equipment rolling out, it's just changing the definition of what it means to be a scaled apparel producer, right? And it's frankly giving those producers a lot of opportunity to really optimize and dial in how they manage labor, how they manage print files, how they get efficiency. But it's also, it's capital intensive. So it's going to be, I think we're going to see a widening of the gap between, kind of really the top of those large players who have these huge fleets and all of this modern technology. And then that kind of, the other end of the barbell, which is kind of more, barbell's actually the other end of the barbell of smaller, more regional producers. But they've got opportunities too with a DTF equipment is typically way more affordable than going into digital. So I think we're going to see some changes just in how, especially on the apparel side, like we're talking about, people operate, and technology is going to drive a lot of that.
On the apparel side, I do think that last mile, you're going to see little micro centers popping up more and more where people
Mm,
can fulfill them more in local markets where they can literally set up these little small little footprint shops. Because with
yeah,
DTF, especially, you don't need
mm,
a big footprint at all. And
that's true.
you can get literally get everything printed, decorated, and done. Small footprint, local market. People pick up, ship, it doesn't matter. It's super easy and
Yeah.
efficient. That's
Well,
one I've heard of a lot of folks saying they're really looking at these little micro facilities and how do they be
mm.
able to support that in the local market.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see. I mean, we talked about private equity and we talked about the distributors, right? You got 2 big players kind of coming around that too. Are we gonna see more private equity cash come into the market and help with some of that equipment expansion? How are they gonna react? Are we gonna see some of these big players follow suit on that micro fulfillment center? We don't know. Could be a trend we see this year. And then the flip side, we've had this consolidation. We've got S&S and Alpha Broder, obviously Sanmar, other big distributors, how their supply chains evolve both by coming together, but by also reacting to some of these technology advancements, equipments, changes, overall strategy shifts. Could be a very interesting year for some new programs that come out.
Well, there's going to be some roll ups too. And you really look at the
Yeah.
overall market. You're going to have the smaller PE firms that are going to get engaged too. Obviously, like you've mentioned before, you got Platinum, HIG, you've got
Hmm.
Apollo. Those are the big ones, right?
Apollo.
That really
Yeah.
are out there in our space. But these smaller PE firms and venture backed companies, they're going to start pursuing more of a vertical integration, I think, from an acquiring
Yeah.
not only the print on demand platforms, but then they're also going to try to go after the content makers and then go into
Mhm.
production. So they can really go end to end from ideation to delivery. They're going to own the entire supply chain. That's something to watch out for. And that's a trend I think in 2025
Yeah.
we're going to see more of as well.
I completely agree. Yeah, I mean, Printful started us off in some ways, right, with Printify and then Snow Commerce, and so I think we're
Yeah.
gonna see similar trends of, that kind of vertical and that roll-up strategy across spaces, and then, the capital markets behind it, we've got so much uncertainty still. We've got tariffs, we've got a new incoming, US administration here really soon. We've got some new EU regulations around packaging safety. So I think the broader geopolitical climate, economy, what's happening in the courts, we mentioned TikTok already and IP infringement. I think that will continue to be kind of subtext. And then even just the broader capital markets of there was so much cash that went into this industry in 2021.
Yeah.
And you're looking at all of these venture capitalists and private equity firms who put money into our space and have a 4 to 7 year target hold period for these assets. So I think we might see some interesting deal structures coming out of that, of the financiers behind all of us looking for ways to really get efficiency, synergies, grow EBITDA, everything that comes with putting companies together and helping them grow.
Well, there was also because of the growth in 21 and 22 coming out of COVID,
Mhm.
you got a lot of people that got overextended. They saw this massive growth. They needed
Yes.
to double down on their equipment. They bought everything, and now all of a sudden things have settled down. That's going to be coming
Yeah.
due. Are the sales there to support it? What does that
Yep.
mean? Are there buy opportunities for other folks? And that's kind of goes back into that whole roll up
Mhm.
strategy. I think that's where those you're going to see a lot of those folks get kind of swallowed up because it's going to be opportune times to grab them. Very, very
Yeah.
interesting standpoint, especially with this new administration. I think we're going to have a more business friendly environment, and there's a higher level of confidence right now. At least I'm
Mm.
sensing out there in the market that hey, let's go get after it. Let's make it happen. So that's exciting to see. I think for all of us, um,
Yeah.
but time will tell. We're only 10 days into the new year,
Time will tell,
so
and I think uncertainty prevails, and I think businesses that are set up to be agile and quick to respond to market dynamics are really well positioned this year. And that's probably always true, right? That's a bit cliche, but I think it's true in particular, given everything we've talked about, new technologies, new trends with different commerce, tooling, AI that's going to change all of our worlds in some way. And so I think those businesses that are positioning themselves to really be nimble and kind of go where the opportunity is, are gonna have an awesome 2025.
yeah. So as far as from a prediction standpoint, there's a couple out there I want to ask you
Mm,
direct.
yes.
In 2025, well, at the this time next year, will TikTok be around still, or will it go away?
I I it has become such a core component of almost like mainstream consciousness. You
Yeah,
can go anywhere online without seeing a reference to a TikTok video or TikTok in some way. I have a hard time believing it just goes kaput. But I think the courts and the regulatory powers that be are certainly going to continue to make it challenging for ByteDance and other foreign entities to operate in ways that they really want to operate. So
yeah,
I don't know. I don't think it's going away, but I think we are going to see some changes.
yeah. I agree. I agree with that. I think there's a lot of pressure. I think a lot of it's just political
Hmm.
posture. Now, I do believe
Yeah.
though too, keeping it out of adversary, you political adversaries, that's important. We want to do that and
Hmm.
protect, you know, all of our data and privacies, but you cannot get away from the power that TikTok brings to the overall
Yes.
print on demand space and the influence it has in being able to buy things instantly. It's game changing.
Yeah.
One thing I'm surprised,
Yeah.
Instagram is not the same. It doesn't have the same push. I mean, it sells a lot, but it's not the same. Why do you think that is?
I'm not a social commerce expert. So I don't know if I have a great answer for you on that. Though I think I I think the way that they've set up the shopping experiences is different. I think TikTok has done a really good job through the platform and just the nature of the usage of the platform on tapping into impulses. I think Instagram taps into something else, I don't know the right word, but I think that that's one of the big differences, and you see this play out in the data of I think it was north of 50% of purchases on TikTok Shop, consumers classify as that impulse purchase, and I've heard that anecdotally. Whereas I think Instagram shopping, at least what I've seen, has become more of a complement additive to a maybe more traditional e-commerce
Yeah.
shopping channels is like a really cool way to find and discover unique products. But maybe consumers are just using them in different ways. And that's why we're seeing differences in some of the growth profiles. But look, Instagram shopping had a huge year last year too. So I don't think the answer is just TikTok shop. I think, we're going to continue to see different platforms pop up because the demand's there and more percentages of overall retail and e-commerce and sales are happening online. So consumers are demanding choice for that. And we're seeing that.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting to see. Maybe it's the better algorithm. They have they're able
Yeah,
to scale it better. Etsy still, I think, is one to keep an eye out for as well.
absolutely.
YouTube, they have so much, but I just it's such a long form. It's really hard, I think, for people to really engage there. But that's one that it's still on the
Yeah,
radar. It'd be interesting to see. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm not a social commerce expert by any chance. I'm not even very good at it. Being social. But yeah, I don't see it as it's anything that's going to go away. I just think that TikTok has got some pressure on it. But I think
yeah,
this time next year there will be changes in place, and it'll still be uh, a major driver for the industry, which is pretty cool to see.
absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely.
Acquisitions this year. How many do
Hmm.
you think? I put 5. I think you're going to see. Last year we saw 3 really big. I have it at 5 this year. 5 that are going to be something that we're all gonna be talking about. What's your
Mm.
number?
Okay. I'm going 4. I'll go
Okay,
1 per quarter. Yeah,
okay.
1 per quarter. I don't know that's
One,
actually how the timing will shake out, but I'll go 4.
sure.
Um, yeah, I think that look, especially like 2024, broader markets did pretty well. There's still challenges. There's a lot of dry powder on the sidelines still in the private markets. We're
There
getting
is.
into fund year 4, right, for people who made 2021 investments. So, I think there's gonna be M&A activity, strategic investment activity. I'm not super bullish personally on I don't think we're gonna see a bunch of like Series B, Series C, Series Ds. I don't think that we're gonna see a bunch of like
Mm,
true equity, private equity or venture capital equity investments in the industry. I think we're gonna see continued PE activity and I think we're gonna see I would not be surprised if we have some strategics coming out and really doing tuck-ins, software investments, vertical roll-up strategies, entering new markets, geography plays. Everybody's looking for growth. And I think, in the vein of that kind of nimbleness and agility, future-proofing where the world goes, um, you know, inorganic acquisitions is an interesting way to accelerate and even just infuse some new talent into organizations. So
yeah.
my number's 4. I gave you a long-winded way explanation of why, but
You got 4.
5 is a good one
What's your
too,
boldest
Rusty.
so off that, what would be your boldest prediction for 2025?
What do you mean?
Okay, I'll give you mine. So my boldest prediction is gonna still be in the consolidation standpoint, is I think Redbubble, has a high probability of getting acquired.
Ooh,
So I'm just
interesting. All
putting
right,
out
you're
there.
putting a
I
name
don't
out
know
there.
anything new. I just look at it when you really look at their business overall. I
Yeah.
mean, the brand's got a ton of brand equity.
Yep.
You
It's
there
true.
for a while. You heard a lot. It's kind of died down a little bit, but still got a lot of brand equity. Strong consumer distribution model, right? And
Yep.
their tech stack is scalable. So why would somebody
Yeah.
not want to go try to make a move on someone like that? That's my bold prediction. Which That's kind of where I was going with it. Is there something out there that you see that maybe nobody else is even thinking about that you're just kind of putting way out there as a
It's a good one, Rusty. I'm scanning because you and I know we're never gonna say non-public things on these episodes. I'm trying to think. I'm like, I know some stuff, but I can't say any of it.
oh
Um,
yeah,
I'm not gonna name any names. I think my boldest prediction for this year is we're going to see some. really cool new software come out. I think that's my boldest prediction is I think there's been a lot of investment over the past couple of years that has poised players across the space to roll out some really cool new tech that could be pretty game changing. So that's I don't know if that's bold enough, but cool new
Well
shiny things. Yeah, cool new
well,
shiny things that
I
change the industry.
tech is driving our industry. I mean, let's face it. I mean, like, at the
Yeah,
end of the day, you can't get product without the technology to be able to order it, to
true.
design it, to personalize it, all those
Yep,
things, to track it, all that it involves it. So, how do we involve? How do we start to standardize some of these different things? I look at again, like the
yep,
platform that you guys had, Order Mesh. It just makes it easier for
yeah,
my efficiencies, cloud based. Why invest in all the different developers and everything? To
no,
me, those efficiencies, technology like that is going to be what's going to drive our industry forward. How do we
yeah,
streamline customer service? How do we streamline shipping is actually something we did not talk about. Sorry, I just
we did
stumbled on that.
not.
And that's something that is a pain in the ass for the entire industry. Everybody I talk to, nobody's got a good solution for it. Everybody complains
I
about it.
know.
And how do we get how do we make that better? Any
Yeah.
thoughts there?
So I've been following the UPS-MI USPS negotiations that have been playing out recently in the start of 2025. Shipping is a oligopoly of sorts, right? There's just these handful of carriers
Keep
that
word.
really control everything, and we all see it. We see it when we walk into Q4 every year of they're going to levy surcharges on this industry, and there's really nothing anybody can do about it, right? And the overall just scale of effort of switching logistics providers, you're thinking about pickups and tracking systems and all of everything that goes into it. So my here's actually a bold prediction for you. I think Amazon is going to enter our space in an even more meaningful way. I think Amazon logistics and Amazon production, they've got the Merch by Amazon solution. They had that deal with Kornit a few years ago that I believe is now gone away. They have such a scale on e-commerce, and it doesn't take that for the rest of us, it's a lot of money, but for Amazon, the talent, the investment, the incubation of solutions that we can use that benefit the industry on the logistics side, they own their own planes, they own their own trucks, right? That's something I could see happening. And on the
They've
competitive
got the
side
distribution too.
of
They've already got
they have the
people going to the freaking
distribution.
door. They go into my house 15 times a day, it feels like. So,
Yeah. Yes, and you I mean, you saw Shutterfly and Amazon Prime come out and say, "Look, we're gonna do something here, we're helping," like so Amazon logistics, I think, is an interesting thing to watch what they potentially introduce, and on the flip side of that, bold prediction-wise, we can't discount the fact that Amazon has one of the largest fleet of Kornit equipment in the US and
yeah.
globally. So we talked about DTF, we've talked about, all these different production methods. We didn't hit on paper, but like you think about all the different product substrates in our world, Amazon becoming a meaningful B2B producer is something that could happen.
So that's interesting. And Merch by Amazon is one that's been around for a long time. They've
Mhm.
been doing it for a while.
Yes.
And on the apparel side, I mean, that's really where they focus. When do they start to branch
Yep.
out? Is this the year they really finally make that big jump and leap into all these other products?
I think it could be,
Yeah.
honestly. Could be. Apparel, I think apparel continues to be one of the largest and fastest growing categories in our space. Obviously, from
It dominates
paper
the
is
industry.
huge. It does, it dominates the industry, but we're seeing drinkware really come out,
Mhm.
in a meaningful way. You've got, some big investment, more private equity capital that has gone behind, PCNA, for example, and everything they've done with Spoke. So I think, it's no longer just the 11-ounce coffee mug. And talk about the merging of print and promo, right? You've got branded products, the Yeti style products of the world. You've got kind of more generic coffee tumblers, like the SKU counts I've seen in drinkware have just exploded in terms of what's possible. And you even have the distributors now. SNS and Alpha Broder have that as part of this is all public, right? Have that as part of what they've looked at in terms of how they're investing in the business. So
Absolutely.
for Amazon, they've been big in apparel. It wouldn't shock me if they get into another category.
Yeah, it would make sense. I mean, at the end of the day,
Yeah.
they can scale it, and why not? Another marketplace out there, it's just one more place to connect and buy. And
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Yeah,
It's an interesting
exactly.
take. I actually like that take. That wasn't on our list actually,
It was not on
but
our
we got
list,
there.
Russ.
We
You
got there.
pulled that
Shipping
one
wasn't on
pulled
our
that one
list.
out
Yeah.
of the
Look at that. I like it.
pulled that one out of thin air.
Magic is happening before our eyes. Let's see. Anything else that you're seeing or you feel like we didn't cover or we should be talking about going into for 2025?
We hit the big things. I think the only thing I think we would be remiss not to mention is sustainability. I don't think that is a new theme. I think that is a continuation of corporate best practices, innovation in this industry. You've had some big players, Spreadshirt, for example, came out and has made some big sustainability pledges that with 2025 realization dates. So I think everyone from, everything from looking at carbon footprint reduction, waste and water reduction in terms of how printing activities happen, green and environmental stewardship certificates, the EU a lot of times is the driver here. We're seeing that play out with these packaging regulations and other standards that we've mentioned. So I think that will continue to be a major talking point across our industry is as everyone involved looks for ways to do what we do in a way that's more efficient, more responsible from a waste perspective.
No, and I'm glad you brought up sustainability because that is something that we actually did have on our list that we did fail to mention.
That's true.
The way I look at it is for our industry to really jump in with the whole corporate market. I'm gonna go back to my favorite topic, which is
Yep.
corporate markets and enterprise, because
Yes.
it's there for companies. That is going to be a requirement. Is you're going to need to be able
Yeah.
to prove, track, and be able to show. Do you have zero waste production? What is your carbon footprint? How are you measuring that? Those are
Yep.
all really important things that you have to do. And
Yeah.
as an industry, we have to be prepared for it. And we have to be able
Yep.
to be part of that solution as well. And
Hmm.
if we're not driving it, we're reactionary, people are just going to go away. And I
Yeah.
actually, it'll be interesting to see how big that happens in 2025 and who's leading the charge there. I know Canva's doing a lot of
Yeah.
amazing things, with their
Yes.
BPPA. They're doing the solar farm. We're actually a part of that as well, which was pretty interesting to see.
Awesome.
I've learned a lot from them on that. They got that I think one tree, one order, or one order, one
Mm.
tree program. So for every order gets placed, they plant a tree. We're going to see, I think, see more and more sellers of product doing things like that, and they should.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and look, it's not just good for the environment, it's good for the wallet. And so, I think as that continues to promote efficiency and waste reduction and not using things that you're going to ultimately throw away, it's the same for the consumer side. There's been so many studies that have proven customers are willing to pay for sustainability in the same way that they're willing to pay for personalization. So, I think it's not just a good thing to do and the right thing to do, it's also helpful for business.
But it also gets offset too. Some of those costs, so
Yeah.
those increasing costs can also be offset though by print on demand because the fact that those orders are being
Yes.
geo routed and produced closer to where they're being delivered. So they're not having to be shipped across country. They're not, those are things that have
Yes.
completely changed the game where now all of a sudden these offsets are happening where the costs have
Yeah,
really come down and it's just as it's not only sustainable, but it's also there is some cost savings there as well. So that I'm glad you
100%.
brought that up. I'm glad we got to touch on that. I know we're at now 53 minutes. We're probably putting a few people to sleep. My apologies. That's on me. It's that boring. But why don't we start to try to land this plane?
I think that's a good way to end it, and I think with that brings us to the end of this episode of the Print on Demand Playbook. Thank you for tuning in. Today, we've taken a deep dive into key trends and developments in 2024 and the print on demand market, and we looked ahead to see what we can expect in 2025.
Yeah. Also, special shout out and thanks to our friends at D Scoop
Yes.
for sponsoring the Print on Demand Playbook podcast. Without them, we would not be doing this. So thank you. If you're not already a member, I highly encourage you to check them out and become one. They're doing amazing things for the industry, helping generate content like this that benefits it all. So look forward to check them out. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with more insights and explorations from our episode that will be done at Impressions in Long Beach. Is that right?
That's right. I will see
And
you
then
next
2 weeks
time
after
at
that, where's that gonna be?
Latvia. We're going global.
Latvia.
As you said, we're taking the show on the road, Rusty.
We're a global podcast. Watch out, Joe
We are a
Rogan.
global podcast.
Awesome.
All
Hey,
right. See you
thanks for
next
tuning in,
time. Thanks,
everybody.
Rusty.
Cheers.